dear ones, I wish I could take you by the hand and look deep into your eyes and say, stop trying so hard. Stop carrying what was never yours to carry. Oh, how we worry, how we struggle, how we try to figure it all out. But listen to me. Listen with your heart, God is already handling it. Do you not know? Have you forgotten? He is the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end, the one who spoke the universe into existence. Do you think he cannot handle your situation? Oh, how we limit God with our anxious thoughts, our sleepless nights, our endless reasoning. But hear me, beloved, he does not need your overthinking, he needs your trust. Tonight, something is going to shift inside of you. Tonight, faith will rise. Because when you truly see who your God is, you will let go of the burden and rest in his perfect plan. God is not surprised by your situation. Long before you ever faced this challenge, he saw it coming. Before you ever cried that tear, he knew the pain you would feel. And before you even formed the question in your mind, he already had the answer. We serve a God who operates outside of time, a God who declares the end from the beginning. Nothing is hidden from him, nothing catches him off guard, and nothing is beyond his power to handle. What you see as an unexpected storm, he has already prepared a way through. What you feel is an impossible burden, he has already made provision to lift. He is the God who goes before you, the God who has already walked ahead and made the crooked path straight. When we overthink, we act as if the outcome depends solely on us. We analyze every detail, we run scenarios in our minds, we stress over every possible outcome. But none of that changes the truth. God has already gone ahead of us, preparing the way. When the Israelites stood before the Red Sea with Pharaoh's army behind them, they saw no way out. But God was not surprised. Long before they cried out in fear, he had already planned their deliverance. The sea that seemed like their barrier became the very thing God used to display his glory. If he did it for them, he can do it for you. So often we waste time and energy trying to figure things out on our own. We try to solve problems in our strength, and when we don't see an answer, we allow fear and doubt to creep in. But God is not like man. He does not work according to human limitations. He sees the full picture, he knows the hidden details, and he orchestrates everything with divine wisdom. The Bible says in Isaiah 55:8-9, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways and my thoughts than your thoughts." This means that even when we don't understand, even when things seem chaotic, God is still in control. He is working in ways we cannot see, positioning people, opening doors, shifting circumstances, all according to his perfect plan. Think about Joseph. He was thrown into a pit by his brothers, sold into slavery, falsely accused and imprisoned. If anyone had a reason to overthink and question God's plan, it was Joseph. But what Joseph didn't know during those painful moments was that God was using every setback to position him for something greater. The betrayal, the imprisonment, the rejection, it was all part of God's strategy to elevate him to a place of influence and purpose. The very things that seemed to work against him were actually working for him. And when the time was right, God brought him from the prison to the palace in a single day. If God could do that for Joseph, why would he not do the same for you? We must stop looking at our problems through human eyes and start seeing them through the lens of faith. What looks like a delay may be divine preparation. What looks like rejection may be God's redirection. What seems like a closed door may be God's protection from something that is not meant for us. There is no detail in your life that is outside of God's control. He sees the end from the beginning, and he already has the solution in place. The key is to trust him, even when you cannot see the full picture. The enemy wants you to believe that you are alone in your struggle, that you have to figure it all out on your own. But that is a lie. You are not alone, and you do not have to carry this burden by yourself. The same God who has carried you this far will not leave you now. He is already working, already moving, already handling it. Overthinking is a sign of misplaced trust. When we try to figure everything out on our own, we are essentially saying that we trust our own understanding more than we trust God. We analyze every possible outcome, replay conversations in our minds, and stress over things that are beyond our control. But worrying does not solve the problem. It only drains our energy, steals our peace, and blinds us to what God is already doing behind the scenes. The Bible tells us in Proverbs 3:5-6, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to Him, and He will make your paths straight." When we overthink, we are leaning on our own understanding rather than trusting that God is in control. God never asked us to figure everything out. He asked us to trust Him. When we place our confidence in Him, we acknowledge that His wisdom is greater than ours. Overthinking often stems from fear of failure, fear of rejection, fear of the unknown. But fear is the opposite of faith. When we operate in fear, we try to take control because we don't fully believe that God has already worked it out. The enemy wants us to stay trapped in a cycle of doubt and anxiety, but God wants us to walk in peace, knowing that He is faithful. Jesus said in Matthew 6:27, "Can any one of you by worrying add a single hour to your life?" Worrying does not change the situation, but faith in God does. One of the greatest examples of trust in God is Abraham. God told him to leave everything familiar and go to a place that He would later reveal. Abraham didn't have all the answers. He didn't know where he was going, how things would work out, or what challenges he would face along the way. But he chose to trust God, and because of his obedience, he became the father of many nations. Imagine if Abraham had overthought God's command, trying to calculate every detail before taking the first step. He might have missed his destiny. Faith requires us to move even when we don't have all the answers. Overthinking also paralyzes us from making decisions. We hesitate, second-guess ourselves, and delay taking action because we are afraid of making the wrong choice. But God does not operate in confusion. He operates in clarity and peace. When we trust Him, He will lead us in the right direction. Isaiah 30:21 says, "Whether you turn to the right or to the left, your ears will hear a voice behind you, saying, 'This is the way, walk in it.'" God is always speaking, always guiding, but when our minds are clouded with worry, we struggle to hear His voice. There is freedom in surrender. When we stop overthinking and start trusting, we experience the peace that surpasses all understanding. God never intended for us to carry the weight of every decision on our own. He is the Good Shepherd, and His desire is to lead us step by step. Even when things don't make sense, even when we don't see the full picture, we can rest knowing that He is faithful. He has never failed, and He will not start now. Our job is not to figure everything out, it is to trust the One who already has. Faith and fear cannot coexist. One will always overpower the other. Fear whispers doubts, feeds insecurities, and magnifies problems, while faith stands firm in the promises of God. Fear causes us to hesitate, to question, and to overthink, but faith moves forward with confidence, knowing that God is in control. When we allow fear to take root in our hearts, we are essentially saying that the problem is bigger than God. But when we choose faith, we declare that no matter how things look, God's power is greater than any obstacle we face. Fear paralyzes, but faith activates. Every major move of God in the Bible required someone to step out in faith despite fear. When Peter saw Jesus walking on water, he had the faith to step out of the boat. But the moment he allowed fear to creep in, when he focused on the wind and the waves instead of Jesus, he began to sink. The same principle applies in our lives. When we focus on our problems, they will overwhelm us. But when we fix our eyes on Jesus, we will find strength to walk through any storm. God does not respond to fear, he responds to faith. Hebrews 11:6 tells us, "Without faith it is impossible to please God." Faith is not just believing that God exists, it is believing that he is actively working on our behalf. The enemy wants us to live in fear because he knows that fear keeps us from stepping into the fullness of what God has for us. Fear will keep you stuck in a place you were never meant to stay. It will keep you from pursuing your calling, from taking risks, from walking in obedience. But faith says, even if I don't have all the answers, I trust that God does. Faith is not about having a perfect plan, it is about trusting the one who holds the plan. In 2 Timothy 1:7, Paul reminds us, "For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind." If fear is not from God, then we must reject it. Faith sees beyond the present circumstances. It does not deny reality, but it acknowledges that God's power is greater than the situation. The Israelites saw a giant named Goliath and were terrified, but David saw the same giant and declared, "The Lord who rescued me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will rescue me from the hand of this Philistine." 1 Samuel 17:37. The difference between David and the rest of the army was not the size of the giant, it was the size of their faith. The army allowed fear to rule their perspective, but David's faith in God gave him the courage to step forward. We must make a decision every day. Will we live by fear, or will we walk by faith? Will we let fear dictate our choices, or will we trust that God is in control? Faith is not a feeling. It is a choice. It is choosing to believe that God is faithful even when things don't make sense. It is choosing to step forward even when we feel afraid. It is choosing to surrender our worries and trust that God is already working everything out for our good. The moment we replace fear with faith, we will begin to see God move in ways we never imagined. God's timing is perfect. Stop rushing what he is orchestrating. We live in a world that demands instant results. We want answers now, breakthroughs immediately, and solutions without delay. But God does not operate on human timelines. His ways are higher, and his timing is always intentional. When we try to rush what God is orchestrating, we step out of alignment with his perfect plan. Impatience leads to anxiety, frustration, and poor decisions, but trust in God's timing brings peace and confidence, knowing that he is working all things together for our good. In the Bible, we see countless examples of people who had to wait for God's timing. Joseph had a dream as a young man that he would one day be in a position of great authority, but he was sold into slavery, falsely accused, and imprisoned before that dream became a reality. If Joseph had given up in the waiting, he would have never stepped into his destiny. God was not delaying Joseph's promise, he was preparing him for it. Every hardship, every setback, and every long year of waiting was shaping him into the leader he was destined to be. Abraham and Sarah were promised a child, but when years passed with no sign of fulfillment, they grew impatient. Instead of waiting on God, they took matters into their own hands, and the result was unnecessary struggle and conflict. How many times do we do the same? We try to force something to happen in our own strength, and instead of making things better, we create more complications. God does not need our help to fulfill his promises, he needs our trust. His delays are not denials. Sometimes he is protecting us from something we are not ready for. Other times he is working behind the scenes in ways we cannot see. The enemy loves to use waiting seasons to plant seeds of doubt. He whispers lies like God has forgotten about you or nothing is ever going to change. But the truth is, if God gave you a promise, he will fulfill it in the right time. Isaiah 60:22 says, "At the right time I, the Lord, will make it happen." If it hasn't happened yet, it's not because God is ignoring you, it's because He is still preparing you or the situation. When the time is right, nothing can stop the manifestation of His plan. One of the greatest acts of faith is trusting God in the waiting. It is easy to trust Him when everything is happening on our schedule, but real faith is built in seasons of patience. God is not in a hurry because He sees the full picture. What we perceive as delay is actually divine preparation. Every closed door, every pause, and every unanswered prayer is part of a greater plan. Instead of trying to force things to happen, we must rest in the truth that God's timing is perfect. When we surrender our timeline and trust Him fully, we will experience the peace that comes from knowing that He is in control. Resting in God is not laziness, it's trust in action. Many people confuse rest with inactivity, thinking that if they are not constantly working, striving, or planning, they are falling behind. But spiritual rest is not about doing nothing, it is about fully trusting God to do what only He can do. When we truly rest in Him, we stop striving in our own strength and start relying on His power, wisdom, and timing. Jesus demonstrated this kind of trust when He slept in the boat during the storm. The disciples were panicking, trying to figure out how to save themselves, but Jesus remained at peace. Why? Because He knew who was in control. His rest was not a sign of carelessness, it was a sign of confidence in His Father. When we learn to rest in God, we stop reacting to every storm with fear and start responding with faith. We don't have to have all the answers. We just have to trust the one who does. In Matthew 11:28-29, Jesus said, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls." This is an invitation to exchange our worry, our stress, and our constant striving for His peace. True rest is not found in escaping our problems, it is found in surrendering them to God. When we try to carry everything on our own, we become exhausted. But when we release it to Him, we find supernatural strength. Resting in God does not mean we stop working altogether, it means we stop working from a place of anxiety. It means we move forward with faith instead of fear, knowing that God is already handling what we cannot. When the Israelites wandered in the wilderness, they struggled to trust God for their daily provision. But God provided manna every morning, showing them that they didn't have to hoard or stress about tomorrow. He was their source. In the same way, when we trust God fully, we stop worrying about the future and start living in the peace of today. The enemy wants us to believe that if we are not constantly working, we are falling behind. But God operates differently. He calls us to rest in Him because He knows that a heart at rest is a heart that hears His voice clearly. Psalm 46:10 says, "Be still and know that I am God." It is in stillness, not in striving, that we experience the fullness of His presence. Resting in God is not about doing nothing, it is about actively trusting Him to lead, provide, and work things out for our good. When we embrace this truth, we stop living in anxiety and start walking in the peace that only He can give. My beloved, hear me, God is already handling it. The weight you've been carrying, the questions you've been asking, the sleepless nights, the endless overthinking, none of it is yours to bear. You were never meant to figure it all out. You were never meant to carry this burden alone. God saw this moment before you even reached it, and He has already prepared the way. Fear will try to creep in, but faith is the answer. Anxiety will try to control you, but trust is the key. You may not see the whole picture, but God does. You may not know how it will all come together, but He has already written the story. Your job is not to stress, not to struggle, not to force things to happen, but to rest in Him, to trust His timing, to let go of your own understanding and lean on His. God is not late. He is not ignoring you. He is not withholding anything from you. He is working even in the silence. He is moving even when you don't see it. His plan is unfolding exactly as it should. So today, let go of the overthinking. Release the worry. Step out of fear and into faith. Surrender it all. And truly know that God is already handling it.